No one told me that she had died, but I had a strong knowing that she died. How did that happen? Does consciousness continue after death? What's it all about? Up to 90% of the people who will die will have some kind of experience like that.
Kia ora, hello, and welcome along to another episode of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Another interesting conversation today where I'm chatting with Johanna Lunn, who is an award-winning producer, director, and writer, and has been in the film industry for over 20 years. Johanna's work has received 8 Gemini nominations, and they are the equivalent of like an Emmy Award, which is no small feat, and she's taken home 3 of them. Johanna is the director and producer of the film In the Realm of Death and Dreaming, Does Consciousness Continue After Death?, where Johanna guides viewers on a journey to find answers by exploring personal stories of near-death experiences, deathbed visions, and even much more. She speaks with leading clinicians and researchers, and she questions the nature of consciousness. This conversation is going to be so interesting. So Johanna Lunn, welcome to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. I'm grateful for your time. I watched your film some time ago. It had a massive impact on me. I love your work. So tell us, where do we begin the conversation? How did you get into making this film about consciousness, death, and dying?
Okay, well, I guess there are, like all good lives, there are so many ways to answer a question like that. I think first of all, I'll back up a little bit to say that In the Realm of Death and Dreaming is part of a trilogy under the When You Die project. And it didn't start out to be a When You Die project or a trilogy. I started out to make one film that since the beginning of my career, I've wanted to make. Very early, I myself have had many death experiences as a young person that were overwhelming to me, and many different kinds of, you might say spiritual experiences around death and dying. And when I was fresh out of university, I had the opportunity to work on the development of a project for PBS in the US. And it was death and dying in the context of community. And I had a chance to meet a lot of early, I guess we could say death innovators, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross at the very end of her career or her life, I really should say. And Stephen Levine, another person who's done a lot with meditation and end of life. And we put together a really great proposal, and PBS said, wow, this is great, but it's a little too taboo. We can't go there yet. And so fast forward decades, and I was at a point after working in broadcasting for many years of starting my own production company. And after a couple of films, I was trying to decide what to do next. And my mentor was saying, well, what is it that you've got in your closet? What is it that you really want to do? And I said, well, this has been haunting me all my life. I want to normalize the conversation around death and dying. I believe that humans are more extraordinary than we realize, and nowhere is it shown more than at end of life or at the beginning of life. So those great portals. And so now the time came for me to make a film, and I thought it was a single film. And the deeper I went into it and the more people I met, I realized I had so much research material. I started a website, and the website became a project and a podcast and now a trilogy of films with a potential epilogue. So the first one, In the Realm of Death and Dreaming, starts with me as an 8 or 9-year-old when my great aunt had died. And no one told me that she had died, but I had a strong knowing that she died. How did that happen? Does consciousness continue after death? What's it all about? And so that was really the opening to the exploration of consciousness, because I think if you're going to talk about death, you really have to start at the beginning, because what we believe happens after we die informs everything about how we live and how, what things we want at the end of our life, how we want to be cared for. So,
it really does, doesn't it? And what gets me is how afraid we can be of death. And if we're afraid of death, then how does that play out in our life? How does that impact how we live, what we believe, the way that we conduct our relationships, our things that we focus on? So what did you find out through this?
Well, I guess on the scientific side, I found out that there is no definitive answer to the big question.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And which I love, right? Because someone can argue, for hours and hours about how consciousness just ends. It's all over. It's lights out. And you go, well, prove it. And it's like, well, they can't, right? And at the same time, we can't definitively say that it does. But there is a huge body, as you know, of stories of people who have had near-death experiences, who've had deathbed visitations, who have had premonitions and all kinds of, deathbed moments that are rich and full and life-changing for the people who experience them. So maybe we don't have the scientific instrumentation to definitively say, okay, this is it. We certainly have a huge body of information that's gone, really spanning 1,000 years easily.
I love that. And these stories, they're becoming more commonplace, aren't they? There's more and more of them coming out. And it's not just that they did happen, they're still happening. I still receive the most amazing emails and conversations that I have where people are sharing somebody came back and visited me after they died, or at the moment of death, this happened. And I just find it so fascinating. I'm curious to know, what has your research shown in terms of themes or patterns or things that take place, particularly in these moments of death?
Well, there are, I guess you could say for different researchers, there are different categories. But Dr. Peter Fenwick in London, England, has done really very exhaustive research on this. And he has about 10 categories with, about 12 subcategories on things that can happen at end of death and end of life, as life and the hours and moments and leading up to death, and then those days, maybe up to 2 to 3 weeks after, that can happen. And I think the most well-known one, of course, are deathbed visitors, which often can be weeks before someone dies. But there, as some people call them, the pickup team comes and they just say, we're going to come back for you. And it's usually received as a very comforting message. And so that's incredibly common. Up to 90% of the people who will die will have some kind of experience like that. That's a huge percentage of us. And surprising that it's taken so long for us to really be talking about them in real terms, not just movies or myths or happens to everybody else, but not us, but in real terms. And even for loved ones who are, sitting at the bedside with someone who's dying, even if you don't believe it, you should always validate people's experience, because to negate one of the most important experiences that we're going to have at the end of our life, the most comforting experience for many, many people, is really kind of criminal. So that is one of the most universal things that can happen. Other experiences that happen at the time of death are things like, I'll put it to you this way. As we are closing in on death, and my 2 other films go more into this, but particularly the third one, our consciousness expands out. And, when we walk into a room with someone who's dying, it's electric. Like there's a huge difference before you come in the room to when you're in the room, because there's just something so awake going on. And it's because our consciousness is unraveling and going out. And it's almost like we enter into their consciousness when we walk into that room. We're in a non-ordinary reality. And for the person who's dying, death is the most non-ordinary reality that we can possibly experience. Yeah. So in that space, oftentimes, the person who's dying might visit someone who isn't able to make it to them in time, to send a message that I'm dying, I'll be okay. It could be a mother to a daughter. It could be to a dear friend or a sibling. But these messages are meant to be comforting for the person who receives them. And so that's quite a common occurrence. But also then there's the other side of it, which is the loved one who's not with their dying friend, spouse, husband, receiving a very strong premonition at the time of their death. Mm. So again, there's this kind of mixing of this material 3D sort of world and a greater, more subtle world that encompasses us individually and as a planet, really. So those are very common. At the time of death, there can be a brightening in the room. There can be a smell. There can be, some people see shapes leaving the body through the head or other kinds, some kind of other departure sort of visually. Sometimes, and this isn't in the realm of death and dreaming, the story of the chaplain, David McGinley, who is at the bedside with a woman who dies, and he feels her go right through him. And he knows that it's her, as some kind of a pat on the back for doing a great job. And then, of course, after death, there can be more messages or symbolic things that happen for the loved ones who are left behind. And that can go on for a number of weeks. And of course, then there's the grief journey, which never ends for us. So in that time, our relationship to the person that we love that's passed, you're not the same person as when they were alive. And clearly they're not. But yet we still have a relationship. My mother died when I was 18, and I'm not 18 anymore, but I still have a rich, relationship to her in a certain completely untangible way. And it's I can't say, I had dinner with her particularly, but there's some kind of relationship. And we carry people that we love with us in some way. Yes, and that's a very beautiful thing.
Is that something that you've always had, do you think, from the moment that she transitioned into whatever's after here, that you've just maintained that connection with her, or was there a defining moment that came back? How did that sort of play out?
That's really, well, I'd have to explain that in the course of 3 years, I had 3 really big deaths. My mother died. My dearest best friend, who's like a sister to me, spent, every waking minute with her since I was very young, died. And then I was in a car accident where I wasn't driving, but the car hit an old man crossing the street on a country road. It was one of these blind knolls coming up. And I ran out of the car and he died in my arms. And so those happened in a very close period of time. So I was grieving on so many levels. It was very, it wasn't just that I'd lost my mother, but it was my friend. And then this old man. And so it took me a long time to grieve properly, because we don't know, especially then, we didn't know how to grieve. We didn't know if somebody had lost just one loss, it was kind of like, ooh, we don't know how to talk to them, So I felt like an alien. And I felt like an alien for a very long time. People just didn't know what to do with me, and occasionally I'd get things from my father like, you really got to get over it,
Yeah.
which is not at all helpful.
No. Oh, wow. So you really have experienced a lot of death in your life, a lot. And so soon together that, my heart really goes out to you, Johanna, because it's just so tough. And like you're saying, back then, we didn't talk about topics like we do now. You're on a mission to raise awareness and bring these topics out to create a place to be able to discuss death and dying. Mm-hmm. But that didn't happen back then. So my heart's really, I don't know, I'm really feeling, and the old man in your arms and so many of these things that took place. I think my question is, did these things, we talk a lot about life purpose and we talk about how things happen in our life for a particular reason, and we may not understand what the reason is, but we just carry on in life and we trust that that was meant to be. Do you think that having all of these experiences with death right throughout your life was part of your purpose? Does that drive you to where you're now creating movies and doing the work that you're doing?
I think that's true. I really do think that's true.
Does that feel a bit unfair?
No. I'm very
it's tough.
I feel very passionate about what I'm doing, and I feel that it's really life-giving for people. I don't want people to suffer. I don't want anyone to ever have to experience the kind of alienation that I experienced. I know a lot of people have. And so I feel very passionate about this mission. And I certainly do think that normalizing death and talking about life, I think that's very much part of who I am as a person. And I've always tried in all the many, many projects that I've done through the course of my life to just simply be helpful to others. I truly, that is at the core of the When You Die project, is I really hope it helps people. I really want to talk about these things because I think it's life-giving. I think it reduces fear. I think our fear is our biggest enemy, like you were talking about earlier. It really, truly is. So if we could live with less fear, I think that would be really helpful.
It would change everything, wouldn't it? And death is one of the biggest fears. And so, I'm very aligned. I love what you're doing. I feel like I'm on a similar sort of pathway of trying to create the conversation. I love to talk about what might be. So you're talking about consciousness after death and all the conversations you've had. I mean, how do you even come to understand or comprehend what might happen? What do you think happens with consciousness after we die?
Oh, wow. Yeah. That is such a great question. And
it's the big one, isn't it?
It is the big one. It is the big one. Well, I do believe in reincarnation.
Okay. Can I ask why? How did you always believe in it, or did you come to a defining moment?
No, I think I've always believed in that. It's kind of, when I was younger, it was simple like this. If you saw a train on an open prairie, and there was a brick wall at a certain point on the tracks, it would smash through the brick wall. And I kind of think that death is a little bit like that our consciousness, our minds are so strong that, when we die, the idea that there isn't some velocity of all of this life force going someplace. Yeah. So that was a much younger Johanna view, but I still sort of think it's a good, it's very illustrative that we just have so much life force. And, from a more scientific point of view, there's nothing in the natural world that ceases to exist. Things transform, so maybe reincarnation isn't as specific as now I'm a white woman living in Canada as a filmmaker, and I'm going to become a Japanese scientist blah, 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 I don't know that part. I love the idea that actually Dean Radin talks about in the realm of death and dreaming, that, well, what if you came back, as a dolphin or a whale, or as or as a galaxy, he really went out there with it. But it's kind of interesting to think how our consciousness could go out and be with, a bigger consciousness, or it could become a humans, or it could, I think that the mystery of that is something that I relish more than actually specifically knowing it. I know there's many different metaphysical cosmologies that people have. And that's great. That's great. But I don't adhere to one specific one, but I definitely do believe there is continuity and that there is some kind of transformation. So I would call it reincarnation. Sometimes I think that, my current dog, Gracie, is a reincarnation of a dog I had many, many years before her. Oh, but, wow. Who knows? Who knows?
We'll never know, will we? And I think that's part of the fun. I think that's why I enjoy these conversations, and I come across different concepts and different ideas, and maybe this happens and maybe that happens, maybe reincarnation happens, maybe we're in parallel time, parallel lives, like you were saying that Dean Radin talks about. Maybe we get to choose. So we get to choose to be the human, or we get to choose to be the dog or the tree or whatever it is. Maybe we come and we have every full experience, because this is something that I was asking recently. I think we're talking about it in our VIP group, actually, around how do we know which experiences we're going to have? Can we choose to have the experiences? Like, can I choose to be me? Can I choose to be something else? And then could it even be possible that we all have every experience? So I'll be me, then I'll be my husband, then I'll be the neighbor, then I'll be the teacher down the road, then I'll be the truck driver, so that we get the full experience and we're all interchanging. And, I listen to myself say this like right now, and I go, that doesn't even make sense. That's ridiculous. But that's kind of what I love about these conversations, is they're so big and there are no definitive answers. And I just love that we explore them, and I love that we question consciousness and who are we? What are we? Because, well, I'm going to go out there and say I don't believe we're our bodies. So from all the research I've done and from my own personal near-death experience, I don't believe we are our body. So if we're not our body, what are we? Is that what we call consciousness? Is that how you would define consciousness? Our essence,
as not our body. Absolutely. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Have you been able to come up with a
definition? I think that I agree. I don't think it's our bodies. And I do think people who, and I've worked at this myself, doing lucid dreaming, when you go to bed at night and you try to be awake in your dreams and even manipulate them if you can, but at least aware in your dreams. And so I think that in our day-to-day life, we have a huge reference point to this physical body. I mean, huge reference point. It's the biggest fear at end of life is letting go. But then when we dream, we do let go of this coarse outer body, and there's a more subtle body. But even in dreaming, there's some kind of relationship to a body. We imagine some kind of, shape to us. But I think that there is something even more subtle than that, that is no relationship to a body. And in that sense, I think it's just awareness. Now, I'm a meditator, and I have been meditating for 40 years. That doesn't make me enlightened. Believe me, I wish time could do that. It doesn't. But I'd like to think it's made me, kept me relatively sane. But the beautiful thing about meditation and having done it for some time is that I'm very acclimated to my awareness, that, we have mental chatter that's keeping us, company all the time, all of our to-do lists. I have massive to-do lists, projects, things going on, all that is churning away. And, and sort of like, oh, that's a beautiful sunrise. That's but underneath all that chatter, there is awareness. There's just this pristine, open field of awareness. And I think that's just consciousness. I think that's what runs through and around everything that is living, that it's not just something that a human being has, but that it is innate to all life and no life, I guess you could say. And this is something that some of the biggest brains that are researching consciousness are coming to the belief that consciousness isn't something that's generated by the brain. Consciousness is pre-existing. It's like the ground from which all of these material things arise. And that makes sense to me. I think that there is just some fundamental awareness. And I would also add a quality there that it is loving.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Would you say it's an energy? Can we define consciousness as being energy?
I guess so. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's not all it is. It's not just purely it's energy, full stop. You're talking about how it's this essence, it's this pure stillness at the base of everything. It's that.
Yeah. Well, I guess when I think of energy, I think of, plugging a lamp into a circuit. And I think that it is energy in the sense that the lamp will light up. But I don't necessarily think that it's oil generated, or nuclear generated. I don't know where it generates from, Yeah. But I think that it does have, some life force, some energy in that sense.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I'm curious because I think of consciousness for me personally, and I'm no expert in this, but I think of it as a defined thing, like it has edges, it's contained. Well, it's not contained. I'm going to have a really hard time to explain this, but it is a thing, and it almost like it has edges on it. And so that's where I go, well, energy, in my opinion, energy it's not contained either, but it could have edges on it. You could contain the energy, just like our consciousness can be contained, I think, to the most part within our body. So, yeah, that's where I asked that question. I'm curious as well, Johanna, you talked about how you had this experience when you're 9 years old. And you were questioning consciousness back at that age, which is quite young to be asking these big world questions of what happens after we die. And you said you just had a knowing that they had died. Well, were you raised in a way that would prompt these questionings? Do you come from a background of faith or beliefs or going to church or anything like that? How does a nine-year-old question these things? It blows my mind.
Yeah, well, I think that I always was sensitive as a child, and it wasn't because of my upbringing. I was raised as a Presbyterian, which meant that really we believed in golf on Sunday. And that if we were in a sermon, the minister would often say, things like on the ninth hole of life. I mean, it really was a very middle-class golf-oriented upbringing. But I think that in that, obviously my father was an avid golfer, but he was a hunter, he was a sportsman, and we were outdoorsy. And from the moment I could probably toddle, my mother would feed us breakfast and then throw us out of the house. And then she would ring a cowbell and it was time for lunch. And then she would throw us out again. And then she'd ring a cowbell and we came back for dinner. So I was always out in nature. I was, hiding under willow trees, looking under rocks, catching salamanders and frogs. it's really, I just was in the natural world a lot, and I just felt comforted in it. I didn't seem, I guess you could say, I didn't have experiences of sprites or anything like that, but the whole world was alive to me, and I was very much at home in it. So I think it was really part of that. And also, I did have some very strange neighbors who, they were a crazy family, but one of the eldest was a twin, and his twin brother was born deformed, and he died at a young age. He fell out of bed and died. That's all I know about that. But Eric was his name. It would seem that he never left the house, because sometimes when I was over at the Christman's home, Eric would be talking to Mrs. Christman, and she would answer him back. And so, okay, that, that was unusual, but, okay. Lots of stuff happens in this world. So that was just another one of those things, is like, so there was that kind of interesting thing going on down the road. And so it just sort of wrapped into, the whole idea of, well, could there be ghosts? Sure. It wasn't something I particularly questioned. But the thing with my aunt was really a different thing, because that was a direct experience. Whereas that was more, oh, that stuff's going on. Okay, let's have a seance. Let's get a Ouija board. Let's do, which I did all of those things as a kid. And even did tarot cards as a teenager. And just enjoyed doing it, But I think I've always felt that there was knowledge outside of books and, necessarily of me. But I guess I just kind of came by it in a very organic way.
Yeah. It sounds amazing, your childhood, being outdoors, being out and about. And I do think we talk about how there's a connection that grounds us when we can be out in nature and not be focused on the day-to-day to-do lists and the stresses and all of the things that we have in our everyday life. It's a little bit different for children, I think, but as we get older and we get our jobs and we finish high school and we have responsibilities and things that we have to do, it can be very easy for us to focus in on things rather than being. It's about doing, and it's about providing, rushing around, filling holes. So yeah, I love that your childhood allowed you to be in that space where you could just be open to it. You could just accept things or question things or let your brain wander a little bit. And I think that's beautiful. I think that's really lovely. Yeah. Have you had any other spiritually transformative experiences in terms of spiritual things that are taking place? You're laughing, so I'm assuming the answer might be yes.
Sure, I had tons of them.
Okay. Are you happy to share any of that?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm just trying to think what's really helpful for people to know. No one's ever asked me that question before, so that's interesting. Certainly when I was 13, I had a little mini near-death experience. We were out water skiing, and, I fell and the boat came around to get me, only I was underwater and the boat came over me, and I was disoriented and I couldn't figure out how to get out. And so I had a bit of a life review and, kind of shown a way to get out. So that was helpful.
Wow. Yeah. Are you happy to share a little bit more?
Well, it was, I honestly, I think in that moment and the other experience I had like this, it's the nowness of the experience that is where all the information is. It's not so much in the details for me. And so in that moment, it was literally like the bottom of this boat opened up into some kind of space, and these tiny little pictures, like they really felt far from me, of things of my life. I was just trying to, what is that? At the same time, I'm kind of panicking, but I'm not panicking anymore because there's this moment, there's this now that is this very really present kind of benevolent something going on here. So yeah, it's sort of like the details are almost not as important as the feeling that there's some other portal that is opened, some other, very present space is taking place, and I'm okay. I'm okay. Exit left.
Did you feel like you had a choice, or you just came back?
No, I didn't. I didn't feel like I had a choice. But I never felt that I guess it never occurred to me that there would have been a choice.
Yeah.
I wasn't in a space that I wanted to stay in. I wanted to get out from under the boat. That I wanted that. I wasn't totally sure it was the boat. I was that disoriented, but I didn't want to be there. So it was like this thing opening up. I don't know why, except to tell me how to get out. I don't know. That seemed to be the primary point of it. But it was really profound in the sense that, when I came up off the side of the boat and bobbed up, it's like all my friends in the boat just had no idea that I nearly died. Yeah. They were just like, well, get in the boat. And I'm like, you don't get it, man. Like, that's not what was happening here. It's like, oh, the boat opened up and this whole thing, it's like, it was really, I think another one of those markers in my life that there is more to the universe, than the dining room table. And so I think that I've had many, many, many experiences like that. I've had chronic migraines since I was around 12 years old. And so migraines are kind of a funny thing because they are a non-ordinary state. It's a very, very painful thing. And so I guess you could say I've lived with chronic pain for a long time, but there's also some kind of lesson in that it is so outside of the ordinary reality that you just realize there's more. All the time I realize there's more, and there's more goodness in the world. And I think I get very angry at news. I don't think it's healthy to watch a lot of news because it's such a thin slice of reality. Like an even thinner slice than what most people experience. And so really, all of these kinds of funny little experiences, whether it was, another little NDE where I was injured and, kind of went into this other space, and it was very loving, and I was absolutely bathed in love, and was reassured, we're always with you, you're okay. We got your back. Don't worry. Now get out there. That's usually my message. Now get back out there.
Yeah.
But I think all of these little things, it's just like, okay, they're like one step at a time. I've never had the big bang experience, but I've had many experiences on the meditation cushion of, again, just extraordinary moments of luminosity and openness and love, that I just know that those things are as real as going to get food at a grocery store. And in fact, that those things are happening all the time. And I don't always go to the grocery store. So if there's a constant, it's maybe not the individual tasks of a day, but that it is this fundamental sort of goodness that I think that is always available to us.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how you normalize it. I love how you talk about it's like going to the grocery store, how it is just everyday stuff. And yeah, through meditation, it's really beautiful. I'm curious to just backtrack a little bit. You mentioned lucid dreaming at one point about going to sleep and trying to be lucid in your dreams and taking control over a few things in your dreams. This is something which I've dabbled in. I haven't had much success, to be honest. Well, I don't believe I have. How about for you? Has that been something that you've been successful with?
I have. Um, I feel like I've been able to direct where I go in my dreams and travel a little bit. I've had some flying dreams. I'd like to have a whole lot more of those. They're just so wonderful. And in those moments when I have been flying, I think that's to me kind of like the ultimate like lucid dream is, oh God, you get to go fly around and see stuff,
Yeah. So fun.
But mostly, I would say, my dreaming is just being very aware of what's happening in my dreams. And I think that's really where it starts. And if you can carry that into your waking time, you really have to journal hard and journal right away. At least for me, I didn't find it easy, but I've been kind of playing around with it for a long, long time. And now I'm much, much better at being kind of getting information from my dreams. I think dreams really can help to guide us. Everyone has vivid dreams from time to time that seem really, really real. And they wake up and that was a very important dream and you get something from it. And that's really where it starts, and everybody can have that experience. And if you really work hard to kind of break down that veil between sleeping and waking, which journaling can do, you'll start having little bits of success. It really is possible. It's just that you also have to lower your expectation, right? You start just really wanting to remember, right? If I started wanting to fly, I'm for sure that would not happen.
Yeah. I wonder if that's where I'm going wrong. I find it so interesting because what I'm thinking is if we're able to be lucid within our dreams, for me, that connects right back into consciousness because our physical body's asleep, but we're still well awake somewhere doing something. And we've talked about this. Is that where we go and have parallel lives? Is that where we're present somewhere else? Is when we're sleeping. And then my other part of that is I often will lie in bed and I'll say, oh, can I just have a visit with my dad tonight? Can I just come out of my body? Can I have a lucid dream with so-and-so who's, they've passed away as well? And I request this and then I go into a meditative state and I just lie there almost like as if I can open up some portal and just magically go on out. Now you say anyone can do this. So maybe, I laugh at myself for thinking that, but maybe you can. But it connects back to consciousness. And then if we can disconnect from our physical body and be our consciousness, we could go and visit with anyone, with all of our favorite people, with people, I don't know, people anywhere. We could connect with different time frames, different timelines. And my mind starts to bubble away and starts to think about how this could all work. And yet we can't put it into anything that can work. But I wanted to ask you about the lucid dreaming because I do think meditation is, well, it's kind of similar to lucid dreaming, I think. But meditation is definitely a doorway to open to have these experiences and become very familiar with consciousness and being in between. I'm going to say in between worlds. I don't know if that's quite the right thing. You've raised a lot with me today, Johanna, so I'm struggling to explain my thoughts, which happens.
Well, I do want to just jump in on one thing about lucid dreaming. And this is certainly true for me. It comes back to that, the course body, our identification with this body, is that I think for a long time in my dreaming, I was really afraid that if I went out, I would no longer be connected to my body. So I think my fear, that fear definitely played a role there for me of not being awake in my dreaming, because I was afraid to lose my body. Now they say there's some kind of a cord or a tether. I don't know. I think that's probably true. I have no reason to believe that it isn't or that it is really. But that fear was certainly there for me. And I'm not sure I'm totally over that fear. I think that when we really come down to imagining our death, it's hard to let go, and I think this is where meditation certainly helps with lucid dreaming. It helps with life. It helps with everything, because we can get so fixated on our ordinary world, right? Like, I have a coffee mug. I love my mug. If it broke, I'd get over it, but I'd be upset for a little while, and it's an inanimate object, but I like it,
Exactly. We are here having a physical experience, and I'm all for meditation. I'm all for all of these beautiful experiences. But at the end of the day, I'm also very clear we are in a physical experience, and we need to make the most of that in a way that's, not go and have every experience, but in a way of being kind and showing love and experiencing things, not being afraid. And it's interesting how fear has crept back into the conversation there. You're saying fear kind of holds me back a little bit. I'm afraid of different things. Fear is the biggest thing. And so if we can override fear with love and with compassion and kindness and all of these good things, I think we can make the world such a better place.
I agree. I truly, truly do. And earlier you sort of asked me, what is your life purpose? And I think that really at the heart of it is to be more loving to other people. I think and I've done many things that I hope, working with forgiveness and, just all kinds of different projects. And I think if we really could come to have more faith in one another with less strings attached, just some fundamental faith in humanity, right? Without saying, well, you crossed the line and now I'm really unhappy with you and you really blew it and blah, blah, blah. Well, forget about the lines. Just underneath it all, I think we're humans and we're doing the best that we can. And the great gift of being human is that we can learn all the time. And I mean, your own story is so inspiring to me, because you went one step at a time, after your injuries, moving forward, renovating your life into this extraordinary life where you're helping people and you're having these conversations and you're opening minds. And that's amazing to me. And this is what life is about. This is what being human to me is really all about. And yes, I really want to go to a star forming nebula and watch.
I hear you.
But it's also amazing when spring finally comes to Nova Scotia, because this is a little province in Canada that hangs way out in the North Atlantic. And while people are already acting like it's summer for a whole bunch of North America, we're still hoping, for some leaves on the trees, So when it comes, it's extraordinary. And I'm always so grateful for every step of the way.
Oh, I love it. We have to be grateful, don't we? We have to embrace our steps, our moments, and whatever's going on in our life, whatever it is, I believe it's the right thing at the right time, because it comes back to purpose. And that was my question asking you, do you think you had to go through all of these death experiences to be able to do the work you're doing? I believe there's a reason for everything.
Oh, that's part of the truth. Oh, I do want to just share one other little story with you, because you mentioned, talking to your dad, and my father died when I was in my 30s. I don't know, 36, I think I was. And we never had a very good relationship. It was a very difficult, fraught relationship. And I was married for 24 years and the marriage fell apart. And when it fell apart, I was on my own for the first time, really ever, because my daughter had graduated high school and she went off for a gap year. And so she went off to Mongolia to work in an orphanage. And here I would, the family home was sold. And so here I was, and I quit my job. So I had no title as a, you are a, media maven, whatever. Was no longer a wife. The mother thing was kind of crumbling because there was no daughter to be mothering with. And so who was I? And I was thinking a lot about my father, and I really needed to talk to him. And this is before I knew anything about Day of the Dead, but a friend had told me, well, in October, at the end of, around Halloween, it's when the veil between the worlds is very thin, and you can invite a dead relative or loved one to dinner. And this is what you do. You spend the whole day preparing for the dinner. So I went to the farmer's market. I bought fresh, beautiful food. I bought really a nice red wine that my father would love. I made his favorite dinner, beef bourguignon. Spent the day, and I listened to his music all day long, stuff from his collection. So jazz and all this stuff. And then when the time came and the food was ready, I set the table. I had his picture at one seat, and I was sitting here, and I put his food down in front of him. And as I was eating, I was telling him all the things I never was able to say to him when he was alive. And when I was done, I put my food aside and I pulled out pad and paper, and I just started doing automatic writing. And it was a letter from my father to me. And it was written in a style that I don't write, and using language is not the normal language. And as it was coming out, it was the most cathartic and beautiful experience, because I felt like this was a genuine healing between my father and I.
Yeah.
So
wow.
There you go. In October.
That's the most beautiful thing. I've heard of the Day of the Dead. It's not something we really talk about this side of the world. Well, not that I know about. Wow, to sit down and prepare the meal and just the love that would go into it. Wow, if anyone decides to do that, feel free to share your experience with me. I would love to hear how that goes. That's amazing, Johanna. Thank you for sharing that. My
pleasure. I made a little animated film about it. If you want to see it, it's on our website.
Okay, yes, we will put the link to that. So if you're listening, you want to see that film, I certainly do. I'll put that in the show notes, or it'll be rolling along the bottom of the screen right now. Go and check that out. So Johanna, your film, In the Realm of Death and Dreaming, it's outstanding. I watched this a couple of years ago. I don't know how I got access, but it was quite some time ago. And I went, oh, this is just fabulous. We need to be putting this out there. I was an instant fan of the work that you're doing. We're hopefully going to be showing your film. And
Yay.
If you're listening, please have a look out for that. Check the newsletters. If you're not signed up to the newsletter, go along to letstalkneardeath.com to get on the newsletter. We're going to be sharing the film, sharing more of Johanna's work, because her work is just amazing. And on the show, we talk about all sorts of spiritual experiences. We talk about the spiritual side of death. We talk about deathbed moments. But so much of it revolves around the work of people like Johanna, who are creating the space for the conversation and making it acceptable to say, well, this happened to me and this happened to me. And, these experiences are everywhere. So is there anything else that we need to know about your films? Do you want to share a little bit about the trilogy, the other ones that we can look out for?
Sure. Here, I'm just going to move this because it looks like we're getting some flaring.
You got some lovely light coming across the screen there. It's beautiful.
Oh, okay. Just so long as it's not too awful. Okay. Well, the next film is called Saying Goodbye, and it will be coming out later this year. And it is really about preparing for death. What do we need to know for our own death? What are the kinds of things that we need to think about? And it does have a little bit about end-of-life experiences, but mostly it's about the preparations that we need to be thinking about, the places that we could die in and what kinds of things would be like. And then the third one, which is called The Architecture of Death, that film will come out early next year. And that's really about the days, weeks, days, and moments leading up to death and after. So there's a lot about deathbed moments. It's all about deathbed moments, actually.
I cannot wait.
So there's our trilogy in the realm.
It's just outstanding. It's amazing. We are going to be sharing these. So look out for links. Like I say, if you want to be updated on things that come out, jump on that newsletter list there and you'll get all the notifications. I can look forward to sharing your work, Johanna. I just think it's amazing. Yeah, Johanna, thank you so, so much. We could talk for 100 hours, but I think we need to, at some point, draw a line.
Well, Christy, thank you so much. I love what you're doing. Your work is just amazing, and it's a real honor to meet you and to have this amazing conversation. And it's true. Too bad we're not closer. We could have a long lunch.
Oh my goodness.